Sometimes, the most effective way to erase a history of dark connections is to shine a blinding spotlight on a single act of heroism. Wesley Clark Jr. entered the public eye with an almost unassailable pedigree. As the son of a 4-star U.S. Army general and former NATO commander, he possessed baseline credibility that most activists spend decades trying to build. He cemented his own public legacy in the bitter winter of 2016. Clark organized and led over 4,000 military veterans to the snowy plains of North Dakota to join the Standing Rock protests. Defending an indigenous tribe's drinking water from the construction of a corporate oil pipeline offered a high-stakes victory for his reputation. It framed him as a selfless leader willing to put his body on the line for marginalized people. Years later, a highly produced podcast called American Psyop emerged, offering a new framing. The series centers on a singular claim that a right-wing religious cult targeted Clark, driving him into a state of insanity that turned him into an unwitting pawn in his own activism. However, the digital record from that time contains audio files and data points that exist in direct tension with this account of victimhood. To hide participation in extremist circles, a public figure can attempt to convince the audience that they were actually the target of those very groups. The most specific evidence comes from Clark's own voice. During the height of the pipeline protests, he sat down for an hour-long interview on the radio broadcast of John B. Wells. Wells operated a fringe program directly adjacent to the InfoWars ecosystem, a platform known for amplifying extreme alt-right ideologies and conspiracy theories. This broadcast took place in late November 2016, days before Clark arrived at the Standing Rock camp. He was already coordinating with these fringe elements before he ever stepped foot on the reservation. To understand the gravity of the venue Clark chose to legitimize, consider the guest featured in the segment immediately preceding his interview, Wolfgang Halbig, a conspiracy theorist who actively harassed the grieving families of the Sandy Hook shooting. On this program, Clark described his hands-on leadership in detail. He spoke of waking up at 4:30 in the morning to check encrypted messages, managing hundreds of troops on the ground, and actively coordinating multiple factions across the camps. The audio captures a lucid, high-level organizer in the middle of a complex mobilization. This record stands as a direct counter to the image of a man manipulated by outside forces. That radio appearance is a single data point in a pattern of associations extending far beyond the North Dakota plains. Digital receipts and investigative reporting connect Clark's network to figures in the QAnon movement, the Cicada 3301 cryptocurrency circles, and individuals who would eventually participate in the January 6th Capitol riot. The operational ties run deeper. While publicly representing indigenous interests, the Clark family maintained connections to an inherited wealth syndicate known as Nexus and private military contractors like Tiger Swan, the mercenaries hired to suppress the protests. These conflicting loyalties are difficult to reconcile, quietly networking with groups that typically oppose those movements. When viewed as a whole, the network suggests the mobilization at Standing Rock served as a cover for a different political and financial agenda. The American Psyop podcast producers were instrumental in this process. They helped construct a polished alibi that shields Clark from this evidence. When independent investigators presented the podcast team with the raw audio of Clark on the Wells broadcast, the producers did not launch an inquiry. They instead demanded voice analysis and denied the record, dismissing the evidence entirely. Complicit media entities often prioritize a marketable redemption story over complex facts. Protecting a polished PR narrative is more profitable than admitting a star subject is an unreliable narrator. This tactic relies on narrative replacement. It is the process of overwriting a documented history of extremism by amplifying a highly publicized story of victimhood. Deleting old social media posts is rarely enough. True reputation laundering requires a sympathetic media apparatus to build and distribute a comprehensive emotional alibi. While Clark secured a new public image, the vulnerable indigenous activists he recruited faced the actual consequences. Grandmothers were jailed, local organizers were defrauded, and innocent people were left to deal with the fallout of the mercenary violence he left behind. This playbook is a tool of privilege. It grants elite figures a clean escape while abandoning ground-level activists to face the legal and physical repercussions alone. Modern media literacy requires a rule of thumb. Whenever a public figure presents a well-funded story of their own victimhood, The audience must verify their raw, underlying associations. The title American Psyop takes on a new meaning in this context. The podcast acts as the operation itself, designed by Clark and his producers to influence the audience's perception of his past. True accountability is impossible as long as we allow PR teams to overwrite history. We have to learn to dismantle these manufactured heroic alibis and look at the actual facts left behind.